At our Thanksgiving dinner, my younger sister stood up and tapped her glass as if she were about to accept an award. Her voice rang through the room, glowing with golden light and the scent of oak. Mom and Dad are signing the house over to me. And you get nothing. Cheers exploded. A few people whistled. Someone even said, "About time." As for me, I didn't clap. I didn't blink. I just smiled. The kind of smile you make when you know a storm is about to break. "But you're the one holding the map." I set my plate down and looked straight at my father. "Dad," I said softly. So softly the entire table had to hold its breath. "Should I tell everyone, or would you like to say it yourself?" My father's face drained of color. My sister froze like someone had just yanked the strings controlling her. And in that moment, the entire room understood that what they thought was a celebration was only the opening scene of a brutal truth. Before I tell you what happened right after that moment, tell me, where are you watching from? And if you've ever been treated like an outsider in your own family, hit like and subscribe, so I know you're not alone. Now then, let's go back to that night. The moment I stood in front of Reyes' vineyard, I knew something was wrong. Cold wind from the Napa Valley swept through the grape rows, carrying the smell of damp earth and fermenting wine. The wooden house glowed with warm golden light, but somehow, it felt cold. No one came out to greet me like every other year. I opened the door myself. Heat flooded out, but it didn't ease the heavy feeling pressing against my shoulders. Everyone in the living room moved as if rehearsing a scene I wasn't invited to. Aunt Rosa was the first to see me. "Monica, you're here." She said it quietly, as though afraid someone might hear. I pulled my suitcase in. Conversations died the moment I got close. They smiled at me, but their eyes slipped away within a second. In the kitchen, Lila stood beside my mother. Red dress, perfectly curled hair. Mom straightened the table runner, and Lila nodded in sync, like they were polishing the final touches of a performance. My father poured Cabernet. His hand trembled, sending a few drops of red wine onto the table. He wiped them quickly, avoiding my eyes, as if my gaze might crack something inside him. A chair disappeared, and everyone pretended not to notice. When I walked into the dining room, the first thing I saw was the chair next to me was gone. Not pushed aside, not placed in a corner, but gone. I moved some chairs to make the room neater," my mother said, her voice unusually high. I looked around. The number of chairs still matched the number of people. Only mine was missing. In that moment, Lila whispered, "The envelope. Where did you hide it?" My mother answered quickly, "In the drawer. It's not time yet." I turned away before they realized I had heard everything. I tried joining a few conversations, but every time I approached, the atmosphere cut off like someone flipped a switch. A few relatives only nodded and turned away, as if afraid my eyes would ask the questions they didn't want to answer. Aunt Rosa handed me a tray of bread and squeezed my hand gently. "Monica, stay calm tonight. I'm here. I wanted to ask, why?" She just shook her head, a shake holding more warnings than words could. Everyone had a role to play tonight, except me. I stepped back and observed the whole room. Lila kept checking the time. My mother stood close beside her, adjusting her necklace like preparing for a broadcast. My father sat still, spinning his wine glass until his fingers turned pale. No one asked how long my trip was. No one asked if I was tired. No one said anything to me, except polite smiles reserved for guests. And then, all the small signs from the past few weeks aligned. My mother's clipped text messages, my father's strange phone call, Lila's unexplained excitement, and the missing chair. Tonight wasn't a gathering. It was an announcement. An event where I was the only one who didn't know what I was about to witness. They had prepared everything for Lila's moment, but they didn't know I had also prepared for the truth they were trying to hide. The things that look harmless in a family are often the very first signs of a coming storm. I grew up among vineyard rows that felt endless, the sunlight pouring down in sheets of gold, the soil beneath my feet always carrying the damp, a sweet smell of ripened grapes. But in my memories, that beauty was always paired with a feeling of not belonging. Once, when I was 6 years old, I drew a picture of the vineyard behind our house. Purple paint smeared on my hands, my hair messy from running back and forth looking for colors. I ran inside excitedly, holding the picture. "Mom, look." I drew our vineyard. Mom was tying Lila's hair with 2 bright lavender ribbons. She glanced at my drawing, then said, leave it there. I'm busy. Move aside so I can finish Lila's hair." Lila twirled, her dress fanning out perfectly. I stood there, the picture suddenly featherlight in my hands, as if it meant nothing at all. In the days that followed, I slowly understood. In the Reyes household, I was present, but rarely seen. At night, Mom often told me, "Monica, you're the older one. Let your sister have it." So I gave up everything. No one noticed. I was slowly losing myself. Favoritism doesn't begin with a slap. It begins with being told to let her have it. When I turned 12, Lila became the jewel of the Reyes family. Mom bought her imported dance shoes from Italy and hired private ballet instructors. All of my mother's social posts were, "My youngest daughter is so talented." Meanwhile, I wanted to join the science club at school. The fee wasn't much, but when I asked, "Mom, I want to sign up," she closed her laptop. "Next month. It's not convenient right now." The next month, Lila got another dance class. I realized everything belonging to Lila was an urgent priority. Everything belonging to me was maybe later. When I was 15 years old, something happened that I never forgot. Lila spilled a glass of red wine onto the white carpet in the living room. I was standing right at the doorway, and Lila was shaking with fear. Dad rushed over, looked at me first, and said, "Monica, what are you doing? You're always so clumsy." I said, "It wasn't me," but the words hit the floor just like the stain. No one bent down to look. From that day on, I understood my assigned role clearly. When something went wrong, I was the first one blamed. I learned to stay silent, because speaking didn't matter. At 18, I decided to move to San Francisco to study and work. The day I rolled my suitcase to the door, the smell of ripe grapes swirled around my ankles, almost like it was trying to hold me back. Mom stood with her arms crossed. "You're abandoning the family when things are hard. You only think about yourself." I asked, "What hardship, Mom?" She turned away. No answer. Lila hugged me, but her arms were loose. Like a hug just meant to be completed. Nothing more. As my car rolled down the small slope leaving the vineyard, I looked into the rearview mirror. My parents still stood there, like 2 unmovable shadows. Neither of them waved. I reached San Francisco and rented a tiny room with walls so thin I could hear the neighbor shutting their door. But for the first time in my life, every breath felt like it belonged to me. I worked in the lab, worked extra shifts at a cafe, and learned to live on my own skills and my own hands. Yet on the most exhausting days, I still asked myself, if I had stayed, would they have loved me just a little more? I knew the answer. And because I knew it, it hurt even more. I left Napa, but the wounds from Napa followed me to SF. One Saturday morning, Mom called. Her voice was stretched tight, like a rope pulled to its limit. "Monica, can you come back to Napa? Your father and I just need a small signature." I drove down the familiar road, vineyards on both sides fading into dusk. My parents' house stood there unchanged, but the air felt entirely different. Dad placed a thick stack of documents in front of me, It's just a refinance. Sign here. I opened the first page. Numbers scattered across the sheet. Several sections smudged. Penalty fees are unusually high. I looked up. Can you explain this more clearly? Mom responded quickly. There's nothing complicated. Just sign. When I said I wanted to bring it home to review it with a lawyer, Dad snatched the stack so fast the paper snapped with a sharp sound. Right then, I saw something I had never seen on my father's face. Panic. A person can hide their words, but never the tremble in their eyes. I handed the papers to Rachel, one of the most straightforward people I knew. She flipped every page slowly, almost as if giving me time to brace myself. Then she set the stack down. Monica, this isn't a refinance. My heart dropped. Then what is it? It's a transfer of debt responsibility. And if you sign, the entire debt, $150,000, will fall on you. I sat frozen. My hands felt like metal. My parents, the ones who always called me the child who can take care of herself, were now trying to use that very self-reliance to save themselves. Rachel slid a folded paper toward me. They tried to hide this at the very back, but this is the most important part. On it was the line, consent for the bank to contact the co-responsible party, Monica Reyes. I read it over and over. Each word landed like a punch. In that moment, I understood. They weren't merely hoping I would help. They had planned for me to take it all. Dad called me that night. His voice sounded strangled. Monica, your mother is sick. Hospital fees are very high. I answered immediately. Send me the bills. I'll pay the hospital directly. Dad stayed silent so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, It's not hospital bills. It's the debt. I closed my eyes. The entire Napa Valley seemed to collapse onto me. I'm not signing anything. Dad. Another silence. Heavier. Darker. Dad's voice turned into an accusation. You're being ungrateful. Monica. My heart fell into an icy void. I put the phone down, and that was when a thin sheet slipped out from deep inside the folder. One single page. One page strong enough to change that entire Thanksgiving. That night, San Francisco glowed with lights. But inside my apartment, everything was dark. My studio was so quiet I could hear the clock secondhand click forward one notch. I sat on the floor with my back against the refrigerator. The city's glow, leaking through the window and painting a faint blue streak across the wall. My phone lay face down beside my foot, the screen black, but the echo of the call still ringing like metal striking metal. Stop being ungrateful, Monica. My father's voice, softened by desperation, then sharpened by anger, stabbed straight into my chest. I thought I would cry, but my eyes were dry, as if my body had grown used to holding tears back. I looked up at the ceiling. A thin crack stretched from the light fixture to the edge of the wall. It looked exactly like the feeling running through me. Small, but impossible to repair. I reached for the stack of documents on the table. The paper was cold, wrinkled at the edges because I had gripped it too tightly while reading. I whispered something I wasn't sure I had ever said before. So, is this what my family really is? The quieter the room became, the louder old memories surfaced. I closed my eyes and immediately heard my mother's voice from when I was little. Monica, don't bother anyone. Let Lila have it. You're the older sister. You should understand. You always make me worry. One memory rose sharper than the rest. I was about 10 years old. Lila wanted to wear the blue embroidered dress I loved. I had kept it for an entire month, saving it for my school performance. I said, Mom, can I wear it today? Please. Mom didn't look at me. She simply placed her arm around Lila's shoulders and pulled her close. Lila looks better in this dress. Don't argue with your sister. And just like that, I wore the old dress, the one with a long scratch down the side. During the performance, I stood in the back row. Lila stood in front, right under the spotlight. I had once believed that was normal, but tonight, I knew it was anything but normal. There are wounds that never bleed, but they ache for a lifetime. In my memories, there was only one person who ever saw me in a way my family never did. Aunt Helena, my father's younger sister, always seemed to see through the walls of silence inside our home. Every time I returned to Napa, she would smile softly. "Monica, you're smarter and stronger than you think." Once, I sat with her on the front steps while Lila and Mom went to try on dance shoes. I asked, barely above a whisper, "Auntie, why is Mom never proud of me?" Aunt Helena placed her hand on my knee. Thin fingers, but warm. "You're not the problem. They're just looking for pride in the wrong place." That sentence stayed with me for years, like a small candle that never went out. Tonight, when the entire Napa house felt like it was preparing to push me aside again, I heard her words as clearly as if she were sitting beside me. And I realized, my deepest wound wasn't the debt. It was the fact that they saw me as their last resort. I spread the papers across the table, page by page, the white light reflecting off sentences cold as steel. $150,000. Late fees. Multiple bank calls. Risk of foreclosure. And my name, printed right under responsible party. I once thought strength meant being able to take care of myself. But in truth, my family saw my strength and believed it meant I could carry their weight too. Looking back, at the girl pushed away from the spotlight, at the woman who walked out of Napa to build a life in San Francisco, I saw one truth clearly. I didn't leave Napa to be free. I left Napa to escape the role they forced on me. And now they wanted to pull me back into that role. With debt. With guilt. With a phone call at 10 at night. I looked out the window. All of San Francisco lit up like a current. I had built my life here. With my own strength. My own independence. I couldn't let them drag me down. There are moments when a person must choose. Continue being silent. Or stand up once for themselves. I sat for a long time, my hand resting on the last page of the folder. The page I had never opened before. I inhaled deeply, not to calm down, but to recognize something. I wasn't the little girl forced to give things up anymore. There was a strange kind of shift. Light, but sharp like the crack of breaking glass. I no longer needed them to see me. I just wanted to see myself. Clearly. Fully. Without bending for anyone. I stood up and poured myself a glass of water. In the window's reflection, I saw a different Monica. Straighter. Quieter. And finally, no longer waiting to be chosen. I knew what awaited in Napa. I knew they had prepared a moment for Lila. I knew my family had no idea how much truth I was bringing with me. But I also knew, this time, I wouldn't sit quietly and let things unfold. I placed the folder into my bag. Zipped it shut. No trembling. That night, I looked out at the entire city and whispered a small sentence. If they want an announcement, they'll get one. The morning fog in Napa Valley is always thick, but that day, it carried a different feeling. The sense of something about to be exposed. I left San Francisco before the sun could rise. Highway 80 was swallowed by white fog. The headlights ahead reduced to tiny fading stars. The folder sat on the passenger seat, the stiff cover brushing against my knee every time the car trembled slightly. The faint smell of rushed coffee still clung to my sleeve. I turned on the radio, then switched it off after 3 seconds. No song felt big enough to fill the silence, wrapping around the thoughts twisting in my head. When the car turned into the valley, the grapevines along the road appeared through the haze, like silhouettes standing still, waiting for something. The air was too quiet. Quiet enough that I could hear my heartbeat clearly. the moment I saw my family's wooden house. The tiled roof, the yellow string lights hanging under the porch, the windows shut tight as always. A cold line slid down my spine. My home had never looked this ready to receive guests. And yet, tonight, they were expecting something big. As soon as I stepped out of the car, I noticed a small detail, but it was enough to put me on alert. A strange silver-gray car parked right by the entrance. A license plate from Sacramento. My family didn't know anyone from there. But I didn't stop. I inhaled deeply and walked in. The second I crossed the doorway, the sounds inside the house halted, for half a second, but I heard it. Dad stood by the bar counter, fingers at the bottom of his wine glass as if he had just set it down. My mother was in the dining room, straightening the tablecloth, tugging at every small corner. Lila stood by the tall hallway mirror, practicing her smile. I had never seen her practice smiling. Never. Mom looked over her shoulder at me, her smile wide. Too wide. "Monica, you're here. I knew you would come." Her voice was higher than usual, like someone trying to hide tension under artificial cheer. Lila turned, took one step forward, and then stopped. She didn't hug me, just smiled in a very rehearsed way. "You're back." The way she said it felt like she had practiced that line all morning. Then I saw something that made me freeze. The living room had been rearranged into some kind of announcement stage. The sofa was turned toward the kitchen. The coffee table moved aside to create space. Relatives stood in clusters, as if waiting for a cue to play their parts. No one just happens to stand like that. They were preparing for a performance. The moment I stepped closer, Aunt Marla immediately asked, "San Francisco must be expensive to live in, huh, Monica?" I nodded. Before I could even respond, Uncle Greg cut in. "Heard salaries there are really high. You must be saving a lot, right?" The question sounded casual, but their eyes were anything but casual. They weren't asking out of curiosity. They were asking to confirm whatever they'd already been told. "When are you planning to buy a house in San Francisco?" Another aunt chimed in. I turned to look at Lila. She avoided my eyes, fingers pinching the side of her dress, brushing the edge of an envelope tucked inside. Before I could answer, Aunt Rosa pulled me slightly aside, whispering, "Don't mind what they say. Lila's been excited lately. She's been talking a bit too much." I stopped. 1 beat. 2 beats. "Auntie, what has Lila been saying?" Aunt Rosa bit her lip, then exhaled softly. "That she's about to become the homeowner. No one should have known that. Except my parents. Lila couldn't have come up with that herself. Someone told her. Someone wanted her to tell everyone else." I looked at Lila. Not at her face, but at the way she stood. At the slight tremble of her fingers when they brushed the envelope hidden in her dress. My mother walked over, placing a hand on her back. "Later. Make sure you explain everything clearly. Don't let your sister misunderstand." "Misunderstand?" I almost laughed. Dad stood farther away, near the window, his hand trembling as he rotated his wine glass. He avoided meeting my eyes as if I carried something that could break him open. The entire room looked like a dress rehearsal. Everyone knew their place. Everyone knew when their turn would come. Everyone, except me. I looked at my mother. Her eyes dodged mine. I looked at my father. His gaze dropped as if he wished the floor would swallow him. I looked at Lila. The fire in her eyes didn't feel like real joy. It felt like relief. Like she finally had something to prove she was worthy. When Mom adjusted the necklace on Lila's neck, I understood. They planned to give her the house and give me the debt. The smell of oak from the kitchen spread heavily. A draft from the garden slipped in, sending a cold line down my spine. The wall clock struck once. Relatives began taking their seats. Chairs slid. Glasses clinked. Everything made noise. Except me. I placed the folder on my lap. My fingers brushed the paper edges lightly. I prepared for their moment. But at the same time, I prepared for mine. My eyes scanned each person. Aunt Marla, eager for drama. Uncle Greg, self-appointed expert on everyone, Elsa's family. Aunt Rosa, worried for me but too afraid to speak. Then my parents. Lila, the ones who had already chosen their debt-bearer. They didn't think I would react. They were used to me being gentle, used to me tolerating, used to me staying silent. But this time, I wasn't here to sit quietly. I whispered, if they want to perform, I'll let them finish their performance. Lila stood up, lifting her glass like she was accepting an award. The room fell silent instantly. She fixed her hair, took a breath, looked at our parents, then smiled. Perfect, bright, and absolutely confident. Mom placed a hand on her back and whispered, it's your moment. Lila tapped her glass lightly. Ting, ting, ting. A crowded room, yet silent like a sealed box. I want to share a very special announcement. Every gaze locked onto her. No one looked at me. No one waited for me. No one thought I had anything to say. But right before Lila finished her sentence, I saw my father. And in that split second, I knew what was about to happen wouldn't follow their script. Everything began to crumble the moment Lila raised her glass. The wine in her hand caught the warm yellow light. Her voice rang out, clear and steady, like an MC who had rehearsed all week. Mom and Dad are signing the house over to me. The room erupted. Applause. Cheering. A relative even slapped my father hard on the back. About time. I sat still, my hand resting lightly on the edge of my document bag, not moving. Each cheer slid into my ears, not as celebration, but as tiny needles pushing me out of their perfect family portrait. Lila smiled. A big, beautiful, rehearsed smile. Mom looked at her as if she had just saved the entire bloodline. Dad stood behind them, stiff but trying to look proud. I watched everyone. The whole room felt like they were acting in a play where I had never been given a role. But then a single sentence dropped the entire room onto the stone floor. I placed my plate down. Metal touched porcelain. The sound small but sharp as a blade. The table froze for half a second. I looked up, my voice soft enough that people leaned in to hear. Dad, should I tell everyone? Or do you want to say it yourself? I saw it clearly. My father's face drained of color. Pink, white, grayish blue. Lila turned toward him. Dad. Say what? The room, moments ago burning with excitement, suddenly dropped into silence as if someone had flipped a switch. My father swallowed. His hand trembled. And in that second, I knew he had no escape. I opened my bag and placed it on the table, like setting down a bomb. The folder felt heavier than usual. Or maybe I was finally feeling its real weight. I set it down. Not opened. Just placed there. The whole room leaned with that movement. Mom stared at it, her lips trembling. Lila frowned. What is that? Dad took half a step toward me but froze, like he knew that if he moved even a few centimeters more, he would fall into a bottomless pit. I spoke, each word steady. Before everyone congratulates Lila, you should all know the actual state of the house. A spoon dropped onto a plate with a sharp clink. Small sound, big impact. When I opened the first page, the temperature in the room changed. I slid the first sheet toward Lila. Bold letters at the top. Mortgage payment. Past due second mortgage. Late notice total outstanding. $150,000 plus. Lila read it, not understanding at first. Then her eyes widened. Her lips trembled. Dad, Mom, what is this? Relatives rushed in closer. No one cared about manners anymore. Daniel, what is this? How long have you been hiding this? Oh my God. And you were going to sign the house to the girl. My father raised his hand, forcing his voice to be calm. It's not what everyone thinks, I cut in. My voice was cold but not loud. Not what? 2 mortgages. Months of overdue payments. The house is nearly in foreclosure. Whispers exploded across the table like fire catching on dry grass. Daniel, were you planning to dump your debt on Lila? Hugo, have you lost your mind? My mother collapsed into her chair. Her hands covered her face. Her shoulders shook. But the hardest blow fell on Lila. She looked at me. No pride. No joy left. Just a child, realizing she had been betrayed by the 2 people she trusted most. Mom and Dad said, the house was paid off. Her voice cracked. They said, I would start my new life here. Her boyfriend, Nolan, was sitting beside her. He looked at the paper, then at Lila's, then at my parents. He let go of her hand. Nolan, don't. Lila grabbed for him, but he pulled away. You want to start your life with a mortgage like this? You want to begin with a house about to be repossessed? Lila burst into tears. I didn't know. I didn't know anything. I looked at her. It hurt, but it was the hurt of truth. An aunt shouted, Lila, Monica just saved you from being trapped. Lila looked at me, eyes red. You knew about this for a while. I nodded slightly. And you still came today to make sure you knew the truth. Thank you, she whispered, barely audible, but my father couldn't take it. He exploded. He slammed his hand on the table. You humiliated this family. You ruined everything. I stood up, eyes locked on him. I didn't do anything. I only said what you tried to hide. My father pointed at me, voice shaking. You're always against me. No, I answered. I just refused to be used anymore. The air froze. A cousin spoke up. Hugo, she's right. You were going to hand Lila a debt-ridden house while making Monica legally responsible. You were trying to trap both of your daughters. Everyone looked at my parents. No one took their side. Not a single person. My mother screamed. We just wanted Lila to have a place to live. I replied. And me. What am I in this family? No one answered. Lila bowed her head. Nolan stood up and walked away without looking back. My parents stood alone in a circle of staring eyes, like 2 people being unmasked in public. And then, a knock at the door echoed through the room. A knock that changed everything. Knock. Knock. The entire room turned. My parents froze like statues. The door opened. A woman stepped in. Gray suit. Name badge from Napa Valley Mortgage Bank. Mr. and Mrs. Reyes, she asked. My father didn't respond. I've been assigned to discuss your credit file and the overdue payments on the property. My mother nearly collapsed into her chair. Lila covered her mouth, eyes wide as if she couldn't believe all of this was happening on the same night. I stood still. My heart hammered, but my face didn't change. The investigator looked around the room. Seems I arrived at the right moment. Tonight, it wasn't just the house being exposed. It was the entire truth of the Reyes family falling apart layer by layer right in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner. Right after the investigator stepped off the porch, the room was no longer a room. It turned into a battlefield. Chairs scraped against the floor. Someone gasped for breath. My mother buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as if someone were squeezing the air out of her. My father was still standing, but his legs wobbled, like the ground had slipped out from under him. Aunt Rosa was the first to erupt. Hugo, how long have you been hiding this? Uncle Marlon slammed his hand on the table. You planned to trick the whole family. Trick your own daughter. No one waited for answers. They lunged with questions. With anger they had swallowed for years because they thought the Reyes family was some shining example in the valley. And Lila, standing in the center of that storm, I looked like someone dropped into the eye of a hurricane. She held her head, eyes red, her entire body trembling. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, straight, silent, and that silence made every gaze turn to me. Someone moved toward me. Not a relative, but the truth itself. The investigator stepped back inside before leaving completely. Her voice was low, but each word was sharp as a needle. Ms. Reyes, I need to make this clear. You hold no legal responsibility. All documents show they attempted to insert your name improperly. The air around me stank. So, I asked. So if you had signed, you would have taken all the consequences. She looked at me deeply. I'm glad you refused at the right moment. One sentence. But it felt like someone had finally placed a hand on my shoulder and said, You are not a shadow. I just nodded. She left, and the truth she dropped stayed on the Thanksgiving table like a stone. A stone that shattered everything is still hiding. Hugo, Monica almost drowned because of you. Uncle Marlon shouted. What were you thinking? Aunt Rosa's voice shook. My father tried to stand tall, but his hands trembled. We just wanted to keep the house. We thought Monica could be used. Aunt Rosa cut him off. Each word, a blow. What do you think she is? A lifeline. My mother burst into tears. Monica, you're always leaving us. I lifted my head. My eyes were calm. I didn't leave the family. My voice was low, clear. I left the place that kept shrinking me. An uncle whispered quietly, but loud enough for the whole room to hear. Monica, you're stronger than this family ever allowed you to be. I exhaled slowly, not out of pride, but from a kind of relief I had never felt before. Then Lila collapsed like a grapevine branch snapped in a storm. She cried so hard her shoulders trembled. Sis, I didn't know anything. I thought this was a gift. I thought Mom and Dad were doing the right thing. I stepped closer. No hugging. No pushing. Just near enough for her to look me in the eye. You weren't wrong for trusting Mom and Dad, I said. But you were wrong for thinking I wasn't worth seeing. She looked up, eyes wet but bright with truth. I was scared you hated me. No, I answered. I was just tired of being invisible. Lila sobbed. Sis, don't leave me. I looked at her the way I once wished someone had looked at me. Then from today on, don't let anyone decide who I am. She broke down crying. For the first time, as herself, not the polished version our mother created. I knew, the moment I walked away, everything would fall exactly where it was meant to. I picked up my folder, stood. No one spoke. The air thickened like smoke. My father panted. Monica, don't go. Please. I was wrong. I looked at him. No anger. No pity. I'm no longer taking the role you wrote for me. My mother stepped forward, eyes red, her hand reaching out. Monica, I'm sorry. Don't leave the house. I shook my head gently. I'm not leaving the family. I'm choosing myself again. I turned, walked toward the door. Each step unhooks another chain from my body. No one followed. No one pulled me back. They just stood there, watching a daughter walk out of the role of the extra child for the first time in her life. And when the door closed behind me, I knew, from this moment on, no one would ever be able to drag me back into the shadow they built for me again. The next morning, was so quiet I could hear myself breathing, a sound I once thought I had forgotten. A pale sunlight painted a soft golden stripe across the wooden floor. A breeze from the bay slipped through the door crack, carrying the scent of sea salt and the cold edge of November. I stood in the middle of my small apartment. Not a mansion filled with the sound of clinking glasses, arguments, or forced cheerfulness. Here, no one tried to speak louder than me. No one tried to decide who I was. I walked into the kitchen. The coffee dripper released its final drops. The rising warmth touched my face like a quiet greeting. I took a sip. And in that moment, I realized, for the first time in many years, I was truly seeing the morning. In the silence of the room, I finally heard something I wasn't brave enough to name last night. I stepped out onto the balcony, leaning against the cold steel railing. Morning dew still clung to the metal, shimmering with a pure silver hue. I thought about the Reyes family, the meals where I learned to swallow my silence, the rooms where I always stood off to the side. The words "you're stronger" are used as an excuse to stack more weight onto my shoulders. All my life, they told me, family means sacrifice. But now I understood. Sacrifice isn't letting yourself be worn down. And family isn't a place where you shrink so others feel more comfortable. A strong gust swept past. My hair lifted faintly. And in that brief moment, I knew one simple truth. I owe no one anything. And I am not the extra piece. Right then, my phone lit up. Lila's name glowing like an unfinished pause. The message had only 3 lines, but each word felt like it held her entire night inside it. Sis, I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix everything. When you're ready, I want to see you. I stared at the screen for a long while. Not avoiding. Not irritated. Just feeling. Lila no longer had her proud laughter. She no longer had the dress our mother chose for her. There was only truth. And the desire to begin again. I put the phone down. No reply. Not yet. Some wounds have to be stitched from the inside. Not covered by a few rushed apologies. I pulled the curtain aside slightly. Light flooded in. The city below woke up with the distant hum of cars and wind whipping past tall buildings. I inhaled deeply. My shoulders felt lighter. My heart no longer clenched. If last night was the moment I stepped away from my family, then this morning was the moment I stepped into my own life. And this time, I would be the one holding the pen. That morning in San Francisco, I understood something I hadn't dared to touch for many years. Leaving a family that doesn't know how to keep you is not betrayal. It is simply the moment you choose yourself again. If my journey touched you in any way, if you've ever been treated as the one who must carry the weight, ever been dimmed in your own story, or ever had to step out of a cycle you didn't create, I want you to know this. You are not alone. I truly want to hear your story. What have you had to walk away from, just to keep yourself intact? Share it in the comments. I read every line, and you'll be surprised by how many people resemble you more than you think. If this story made you see a corner of yourself, hit like, so the algorithm knows that healing stories deserve to be seen. Hit subscribe, so I can tell you many more stories about courage, about boundaries, and about refusing to let anyone decide your worth. See you in the next story.